This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
Lara Uretzian is joining us right now. She is a criminal defense attorney, one of the best in the country. Lots of people having lots of opinions this last week or two as we saw Leslie Van Houten being released from prison all these years after the murder that she was involved in as a member of the Manson family, the LaBianca murders. And if you look into the details of that, it's pretty striking and stunning and gory and horrific. And oh my God, how could a human being be capable of doing this? Even if you're a 19-year-old influenced by Charles Manson. She's free. Laura, has justice been served?
Well, I mean, our system is the kind of system that allows people who are in prison to be released, once the parole board is convinced that they're no longer a danger and they've been rehabilitated. I mean, she's been in for over 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, almost three times more. She was, 19
yes.
when this all happened, and she's now 73. That's a long time for her to contemplate what she did and to make herself a better human being. As far as justice is concerned, if you're looking at it from the legal perspective, yes. I mean, you could say the parole board and, the parole board thought that it's time for her to be released. The governors tried to stop it. They couldn't. The courts actually were on her side. So she's going to come out from the perspective of the victims and the family members of the victims. Of course, they're going to think that justice hasn't been served. And if you look at it from their perspective, of course, justice has not been served. Mm-hmm. How can anyone who has lost a loved one in a brutal manner that we have in the Charles Manson killings, murders, feel okay about this? It's just not possible. It's not easy to forgive. I know we're supposed to forgive, but again, I can't help but look at it also from their perspective and tell you from their perspective, maybe I can understand. I understand why they would be upset.
I mean, this is something that did take place 50 years ago, but obviously it doesn't change the brutality of it. I think what everyone's just trying to wrap their minds around is how did the system work in a way where she was once on death row, and then obviously it was downgraded when the death penalty went away to life in prison, and then somehow eventually to parole. It seems to defy logic, and it makes a lot of people wonder about, cases that are absolutely horrible now. I mean, could you contemplate 50 years from now Lori Vallow being released from prison because she's been a model prisoner, or insert anyone else here?
I guess, that's always a possibility, right?
Yeah.
I can't rule that out. How can I? In 50 years, a lot can happen. The way people approach things can change. People can rehabilitate themselves. Part of the key here is, listen, 50 years is a lifetime.
Sure.
It really is. It's a lifetime. And how old was Leslie when this happened? She was 19. Her brain's not even completely formed, and she's being manipulated by a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Right? At some point, after the 50, 52, 53 years, if you see she has been a model prisoner. She's gotten, a master's degree, right? Mm-hmm. She's tutoring others. She's truly a great human being. That's very different than the naive 19-year-old who was manipulated and brainwashed by Charles Manson, right?
Sure.
So then you have to be able to separate those two. So I understand it from the legal perspective, from the way our system is set up. She's no longer on death row. Mm-hmm. So the possibility of parole was there for her, was available for her. Mm-hmm. So then, it's up to the board to decide if this is the kind of person that should be allowed to leave prison. Now, the other part that we're not even discussing is, how is she going to be now that she's out? I mean, the only life she knows or has known for the last over 50 years has been behind bars, where someone controls every aspect of your life. My goodness, a lot has happened since she was convicted and was behind bars. And how is she going to be able to transition easily Yes, she's going to have about a year in a halfway house, but how much could they do for her in a halfway house, right? How prepared is she going to be? And I'm just curious if our system is prepared to help someone like her transition into what we call the normal day-to-day life.
Well, I would imagine she's not the only one who's done it. So I would imagine there's some sort of system in place to try and help. Quite often we look at the criminal justice system and, the rehabilitation aspect of it. And it's never really all that positive. There's not a lot of rehabilitation that goes on in prisons. But Leslie is actually a fairly good example of just that. She has spent most of her life after her conviction doing good. And I think trying to do the best that she can for her existence in a prison society. And I totally agree with that. I guess, does this end up setting some sort of example that shouldn't be set with something like this being as high profile as it was? Again, like I said, these sort of things happen all the time. The reason that we're getting so much attention is because it's a very high profile case.
Right. We're getting a high profile, but I think it sets a good example. I mean, that's the way I approach it.
Okay.
It gives these prisoners an incentive to lead good lives, to become model prisoners, because you know that not every prisoner is like Leslie Van Houten. There's plenty that are very violent and become gradually more and more violent and commit more crimes while in prison. So yes, of course you want to leave that sliver of possibility that these people can come out if they are model prisoners. Why not? I don't think you're setting a bad example.
That's a good point.
Quite the opposite.
Yeah,
quite the opposite.
I didn't even think it from that perspective, but it kind of does give some incentive for within the system of, yes, you can sit in here and be an ass for however much time you have to be in here. Or look at this. Here's an example of someone who no one thought would ever get out has gotten out because of their own behavior and of being a decent human being while behind bars.
And the one key thing that the takeaway is that she didn't just try it once and she was out. It took over 50 years.
Yes.
All right. So if we're worried about, others thinking we're going to be able to come out very quickly. No. This is not an easy process.
Yeah.
You've got to be a model prisoner, not just for 1 year, 2 years. It's years and years. And you're going to try over and over again. I mean, how many times did she try and she was turned down? It took, it was an arduous road, right?
Yeah.
To her release. So we know that it's not easy, but it's possible. And again, that's that sliver of hope. And I think it's okay to have that. And why else do we have the system?
Well, that ultimately ends up being the argument. If this is some sort of reform system and we don't recognize reform when it actually happens, then what are we doing?
Exactly.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers Podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.